All right, we are live. I think.
Yes.
I think we are live. Although Instagram again does not want to cooperate. Anyway, it's 11 o'clock or just a minute or two after on Tuesday. And you know what that means? That means Anastasia and I are talking about real estate and its importance. You know, being the director and the Chiron guy and everything else is not easy. Anyway, let's get started. I'm Stuart Fournier. I'm a 25-year veteran of the real estate world here in Los Angeles and specifically the South Bay areas. And we're going to talk real estate for the next 20 minutes. And it's my pleasure to introduce my co host.
Hello, everyone. It's Anastasia Bonholzer, mortgage broker. I'm located in the South Bay in Redondo Beach, and I'm also licensed in Florida and Texas. And today is a topic that Stuart likes a lot. I'm kidding. He didn't like it as much yesterday, but I like it because it really, a really good inspector, a home inspector could save or not save a deal. And I think home inspectors not talked about typically in a transaction. Usually it's the realtor, the lender, but we're giving the home inspector some love today.
Absolutely. And the reason we wanted to do that is that uh, well, let me give a little background. We had a very strenuous closing yesterday, and it had to do mainly with the whole inspection process, which I think people underestimate. You know, as realtors, we do not even consider the deal halfway through until we actually get the home inspection and have everybody agree to what's right or what's wrong with the property. That's really the biggest bottleneck of any transaction. It's the one that becomes the most emotional. So I thought I'd break down today some of the important things that you should realize when you get your home inspection. And what I'd like to do today is just start off with how important it is to have one. Now, that may seem really self-evident, right? Of course, you're going to have an inspection. But you know, when back in the day when we had multiple offers, there were actually people that decided that they weren't going to make their offer contingent on an inspection, which is a real big mistake. It's almost like buying a foreclosure, which, if you don't know, is probably the riskiest purchase you can make. So, just as a side note, real quick, never ever make an offer and write off your ability to have the inspection. Now, even if you write off the inspection, you still have the right to go on the property and inspect it. But what you have agreed to, if you don't do it contingent, is that you have no outs in terms of complaining or wanting to have something fixed before you close escrow and take possession of the property. So, you know, we even
Stuart,
have
I have a question.
yeah.
What happens if the property previously had an inspection? That comes up quite a bit, and my clients are like, "Why do I need to spend money on a new one if the prior buyer who backed out for whatever reason had their home inspector?" And I always like my clients to have their own inspection, even if it's been done before, because we don't know the integrity of that inspector. We don't know if he's qualified. We haven't vetted that inspector. We don't know, at least from my perspective, right? So, do you have any insight if there's already been an inspection done, whether by the seller or a prior buyer that just canceled on the transaction? Is that
Yeah.
okay?
Okay, you kind of asked a rhetorical question because you answered all the reasons,
Yeah.
but I'm just kidding. Yes, it is still essential that you use your inspector. In fact, I want to emphasize the fact that it should be your inspector, not anybody else's inspector, including maybe even your agent. So if you have a good inspector and you want to use your inspector that you have trust and know is going to do a good job specifically for you, don't forget that prior inspector's obligation was to another person. Now, inspectors do have liability issues when it comes to representing you. So, yes, you could use that inspection. However, there's no guarantee that you can use that inspection in a legal situation later on down the line because you didn't hire that inspector and that inspector has no obligation to you whatsoever. Interestingly, though, with your question is the fact that as a buyer, you have the right to see that prior inspection. In fact, the seller has to give you that inspection even though you didn't pay for it. So that's a disclosure issue. So, yeah, absolutely, you want to do that. Um,
Thanks for clarifying. That's
yeah,
awesome. That's exactly what I wanted to hear. Because,
right,
from a lender's perspective, we don't usually get involved in the inspections because we don't want to know what's wrong with the property. That's actually a
right,
taboo thing.
right.
But I always say, get your own inspection. It's essential. You make sure you can't trust anybody else. I mean, not that I'm distrusting, but I trust no one when
Right.
it's the
Well,
biggest purchase of someone's life.
the bottom line is buyer beware, and that's when buyer beware becomes an essential issue. The fact of the matter is that sellers usually don't know enough about their house to tell you everything that might be right with it or might be wrong with it. And so it's always good to have an inspector because the objectivity is the most important part. We want everyone to know that there's more of, it's not just an opinion, it's basically a professional coming in and showing you exactly what's right and what's wrong with the house. And more importantly, whether it's a serious issue or not. And that was the thing that I wanted to get into today. What I'm seeing, Anastasia, which is kind of disturbing to me, is more agents starting to use inspections as a negotiation platform to reestablish what the actual purchase of the house is. And that is
Mm.
not what an inspection is designed for. For any of you that have the notion or have been told that we'll just renegotiate once we get the inspection, that's a real no-no. And it's one that very experienced agents can see coming a mile away. And the reason that I say I've seen that more often than not, and it gets pretty complicated. You can interpret this any way that you want, but I'm seeing more and more estimates on the actual cost of things that are called out. What do I mean by that? Well, what I mean by that is, for example, we can get an estimate from a contractor or an inspector or someone who's not even licensed, and it says what's wrong with it. I'm sorry, the invoice will say this is the service, but right next to it, guess what? There's no price. And so this was something that was very disturbing to me, and that's something that you as a seller should never put up with. Always make sure that you get a detailed estimation on what something will cost. Now, the reason that you want to do that, and as a seller, we encourage people not to do their own repairs. There's
Mhm.
circumstances where it might be different. You might be buying from a contractor or somebody who's handy, does their handiwork, and they'll just fix it for you before you close escrow. But for the most part, people don't do that, and we suggest you don't do that because it's better to give a credit, and this is where Anastasia comes in. It's better to give a credit and have, as a buyer, you take a credit off the purchase of the house, whether it's
You get a
$1,000,
sum
whether
of
it's
money. A
50.
credit just means like, if it costs, I don't know, the AC is broken and it will cost $5,000 to fix it. Instead of fixing the AC, the buyer will get $5,000. It will be credited to the buyer at closing,
Right. And this is a
so they can
question.
do it themselves.
Exactly. And that's what we encourage more often than not. Unfortunately, that opens up the road for renegotiation of the terms of the contract, which is something we try to
Mhm.
stay away from, because the original offer and the original acceptance really is what we call good faith in terms of everybody just applying the nuances and the requirements of the contract. But of course, during the actual inspections and during the actual period in escrow, there are all kinds of things that can come up, and we have to adjust accordingly so that everybody's happy about what the outcome can be. 9 times out of 10, everyone can agree once they get a thorough and complete inspection with potential prices, put next to the repairs, that everyone can check out and feel good about. But
Mhm.
again, what I'm seeing consistently now are just these estimates that people come up with that don't really have a price next to them because they know they're going to get a credit. And they start to use that as a negotiation tool to bring the price down. And again, it's something I, definitely think is going down the wrong path. But I had a question for you, Anastasia. I know that the lenders do not get involved in the inspection process, nor should they, quite frankly. It's not what they do for a living. It's not what they should be
Yeah, there are
responsible
actually
for.
loan products in which the lender does get involved, and that's the VA loan.
Ah,
If when there is a VA loan, a termite inspection is required, even if the general inspection does not flag any termites in the property. it doesn't matter that you can't see the termites. It doesn't matter that there's no termites on the property, period. We still require a termite inspection with a paid invoice, right? So that's another element where a specific loan type does require that specific inspection. It's part of the VA guidelines.
Right. And
But
so,
the type of credits that you get, right? What if it exceeds the loan that you have, which has happened to me in the past? There was a house that we closed last summer in Idlewild. The house was marketed to have been winterized, which means it had certain, however it was built, it's meant to last through the winter. Well, unfortunately, the person who previously owned it never used it in the winter. So they assumed it was winterized, and advertised it as such, but it actually wasn't. So in order to winterize this property, it would have cost $60,000. In this case, you can only get so many credits, and in
right.
this case, we had too many credits to be able to put somewhere, because we paid off closing costs and we paid off what we could, and so we did then a rate buy down. So there's always a way, and then ultimately a price reduction, and that's what I think you're talking about is
Right.
try
And
to.
that's actually a question I had for you is is there a percentage involved, or what are the circumstances by which the lender becomes concerned when there's too much of a credit
Yeah,
that's being asked
most
for?
definitely. If somebody's coming in with 3% down payment, they are only allowed to have 3% concession off of the purchase price. So it's a
Interesting.
mathematical equation. If anybody's coming in from 5 to 10%, they're allowed to have another. It's layered approach. The maximum concessions allowed for conventional financing is up to 6%. For FHA, it's also 6%. So we look at the down payment for the borrower in order to determine the maximum credits we're allowed to take from the seller. And it's based on loan type, and it's based on down payment of the borrower. So I always work, with my realtor to determine what are the max credits. I just had a purchase close last week where we also had too many credits, where it exceeded the loan type, and we end up lowering the purchase price by 5,000 because we still wanted the credit. We don't want to, it's not a freebie over here. So we had to reduce the purchase price in that case to still have the credit and to
Right.
still be able
And
to
you might want to
utilize the
explain
full amount.
correct me if I'm wrong. When we do something like that, we are asking permission from the seller to lower the original asking
Correct.
price. Right.
Yeah, there's an addendum that had to go out in which we're all in agreement that because we're getting $20,000 in credits and the lender can only have $15,000 in credits, what happens to the $5,000 that is now extra? Well, we have
Right.
no room for it. We have nowhere to put it because the loan does not allow for it. So in this case, we reduce the purchase price by 5,000, and the
Right.
seller has to agree to it because they
And
agreed to the 20,000, and there's no other option in this case.
right, which speaks to the issue that we're talking about today when it comes to legitimizing the actual credit itself. In other
Yep.
words, what is the real repair cost? In other words,
Yeah.
did you go out, did you find out from a contractor or even a handyman,
For
that
sure.
this
And
was a
sometimes there could be a
realistic
big
thing?
spread. I've seen it. Sometimes that AC will cost $5,000 to
Right.
fix. Sometimes my buyer's like, it's 10,000, and the seller comes back and says, "No, it's 1,500." So
Right.
sometimes there is a big spread between what we think things will cost in repair value, and that's why general contractors and having a good general inspection is essential. Somebody
Right.
who's fair, somebody who's not trying to, take advantage of either party.
Right. And by the way, just as another side note, inspectors are not licensed contractors. Your inspectors are not they can be, I shouldn't say they aren't,
Yeah.
but for the most part, your inspectors are not
I think they
contractors.
should be, but they should be. That's
Yeah,
another topic altogether. Is they
right,
should have some sort of understanding of how much things cost. But you're right. Inspectors do not have to be a general contractor. The inspectors that I deal with are general contractors, which makes it easier for
right,
everyone involved because that quote becomes legitimate because they know exactly how much certain things cost through
right.
their trade.
Now, another thing that we run into that can be difficult is most, even handymen, don't necessarily like to give estimates on small issues. Anything under $5,000 nowadays, you cannot, it's very difficult to get a contractor out there. right? So a lot of times we run into situations where we might have a minor repair, something on the order of $1,000 or $1,500 for a plumbing issue or something, but nobody wants to come out and give that estimate
Yeah.
because they consider it a waste of their
Yeah, it's a
time.
waste of time, right? Yeah.
Right. So, again, that's a very difficult situation. And in fact, that's what I think is happening nowadays is that people, by law, we have to suggest and we encourage you to use licensed contractors. But licensed contractors, for the most part, are very difficult to get because of the small ticket items. So, that's something that you need to work out with your realtor. Um,
Hmm.
and the other thing, I guess I've said it on, 16 different ways to Sunday here, but double check those estimates as well. Make
Yeah.
sure that you are talking apples to apples, n- you know, n- not apples to whatever,
Yeah.
anybody's
I want to
opinion
add
is.
something too that just it's important to evaluate everything. We live in California. Termites might be an issue. Make sure that you do due diligence on the roof. You might need an extra specialist if there's anything that was flagged that potentially could be mold. General inspectors are not meant to cover every type of facet of inspections.
Correct.
If there's, plumbing, there might be a sewer issue. Maybe we should get a plumbing inspector that's specific to that trade. Um, and not assume that the general inspector will know and will cover every single thing that might be wrong with the home.
Absolutely. That's great advice. Okay, everyone, it's 16 past the hour. We have a 20-minute time limit. So we just want to announce that we probably will not be on the air for the next couple of weeks. We hope you all enjoy your holidays, but that doesn't mean we're not here. Anastasia and I are here to answer any questions that you have about real estate or, if you're considering in the next year, well, if you're considering tomorrow, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But for the most part, if you are in the mode where you're, strategizing for the next year to buy a home, we would love to talk with you and map out a situation, that makes it feasible for you. We've both been doing this for a very long time, and we love working for first-time buyers, and we love working with empty nesters. We love, working with all kinds of clients. So please feel free to reach out during the holiday season, and we're happy to help.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Stuart. Happy holidays, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
All right. See you next year, I think. Oh,
Bye.
and you have a good time in Japan. I'm jealous.
Yeah. Yes, I will sure will.
Okay. Take care. Bye bye, everybody.
Bye.